and welcome to this second and final, it's not a very long play, final session on this first look at Campaspe by John Lyly. We rather enjoyed the first half of the play. We're now up to Act 3, Scene 4, and we're going to be rattling on to the end of the text. It's a play for the children of the Chapel Royal, sometime prior to 1584. That's sort of its latest date. It was probably performed at court around about then, and had earlier performances maybe the year before. Yes, we've been very interested in what this play is doing. Its intelligence and its wit and things. If you want to know what's going on, go back to and watch the previous video and join us from the beginning, because it's worth starting from there. Begin at the beginning, continue to the end, and then stop. So we have gathered this wonderful team of people to continue the reading today, and reading the title character Campaspe and also Phrigius is
Aliki Chapple. I'm an actor, translator, and theatre maker from Greece and the US, now based in the north of England.
And I will apologise for all of my pronunciations of names as we go. The pronunciations of names are not authoritative at all. Reading Psyllus, Perim, and Milectus today is...
Hello, I'm Helen Good. I'm a historian in Yorkshire.
Reading Apelles today is...
Hi, I'm Lynn. I'm a college writing teacher in the Northwestern United States.
Reading Diogenes, his tub, and Trico is...
Hello, I'm Sarah, and I'm very excited today because it's snowing where I live.
Reading Alexandra the Great and Sylvius is...
Alexandra, and this must be the culmination of my life. I was named to play this part.
Reading Manet's Milo and the epilogue at Blackfriars at the end is...
Hi, I'm Alan Scott. I finally managed to get out of the tub I was stuck in yesterday.
Yes, the tub has been passed on like an heirloom, actor to actor. Reading Hesphaestion today and Epilogue at the court is...
Hi, I'm Lois. I'm a retired academic, and trendy Shoreditch, where I live, is largely wasted on me.
Reading Crysus, People and Lays is...
Hi, I'm Lisa Hill-Corley. I'm an actor and writer right outside of Washington, D.C., live from my son's room with the beagle coming in and out today.
Yay! More animal action. We always like we haven't had enough dog action on camera. Actually, we've had a lot of cats, but the dogs tend to be off camera action. Reading Parmenio, Granichus, and Page today is...
Hi, I'm Eric, and I just realized I need to write this down because I'm going to forget who I am. I mean, I always forget, but you know, that's during...
Your name's Eric. Reading Clytus and Solinus today is...
Hello, my name's Francis Cox. I'm an actor living in Amsterdam, where it's not snowing.
And while you cannot see my dog, you can probably hear her barking in the background just there. That was Ruby, guest appearing on vocals. And I'm your host, Robert Crighton. I will be reading various stage directions as and when they come. There aren't a vast number of stage directions in the original text. There are some inferred ones that have been added later. I think I've covered everyone. Anyone I haven't said hello to? I think we've done a lot. Okay, we're going to leap straight into Act 3, Scene 4. We've just finished some art criticism with Campaspe. We're now going somewhere else and encountering Clytus and Parmenio.
Parmenio, I cannot tell how it cometh to pass that in Alexander nowadays there groweth an impatient kind of life. In the morning he's melancholy, at noon solemn, at all times either more sour or severe than he was accustomed.
In king's causes, I rather love to doubt than conjecture, and think it better to be ignorant than inquisitive. They have long ears and stretched arms, in whose heads suspicion is a proof, and to be accused is to be condemned.
Yet between us there can be no danger to find out the cause. For that there is no malice to withstand it, it may be an unquenchable thirst of conquering maketh him unquiet. It is not unlikely his long ease hath altered his humour. That he should be in love is not impossible.
In love, Clytus? No, it's far from his thought is treason in ours. He whose ever waking eye, whose never tired heart, whose body patient of labour, whose mind unsatiable of victory, hath always been noted, cannot so soon be melted into the weak conceits of love. Aristotle told him there were many worlds, and that he hath not conquered one that gapeth for all, Galleth Alexander. But here he cometh.
Indeed, he does indeed. Here enters Alexander and Hesphaestion.
Parmenio and Clytus, I would have you both ready to go into Persia about an embassage, no less profitable to me than to yourselves honourable.
We are ready at all commands, wishing nothing else but continually to be commanded.
Well, then withdraw yourselves till I have further considered of this matter.
And exeunt Clytus and Parmenio.
Now we will see how Apelles goeth forward. I doubt me that nature hath overcome art, and her countenance his cunning.
You love, and therefore think anything.
But not so far in love with Campaspe as with Bucephalus, if occasion seem either of conflict or of conquest.
Occasion cannot want, if will do not. Behold, all Persia swelling in the pride of their own power. The Scythians careless what courage or fortune can do. The Egyptians dreaming in the soothsayings of their augurs and gaping over the smoke of their beasts' entrails. All these, Alexander, are to be subdued, if that world be not slipped out of your head, which you have sworn to conquer with that hand.
And Diogenes somehow appears in his tub, as well as the entrance here of Crysus.
I confess the labours fit for Alexander, and yet recreation and necessary among so many assaults, bloody wounds, intolerable troubles. Give me leave a little, if not to sit, yet to breathe, and doubt not but Alexander can, when he will, throw affections as far from him as he can cowardice. But behold Diogenes talking with one at his tub.
One penny, Diogenes, I am a cynic.
He made thee a beggar that first gave thee anything.
Why, if thou wilt give nothing, nobody will give thee.
I want nothing, till the springs dry and the earth perish.
I gather for the gods.
And I care not for those gods which want money.
Thou art right, a cynic will give nothing.
Thou art not that will beg anything.
Alexander, King Alexander, give poor cynic a groat.
It is not for a king to give a groat.
Then give me a talent.
It is not for a beggar to ask a talent. Away! Apelles.
And there is once again the discovery here of the entrance of Apelles and Campaspe at this moment.
Here?
Now, gentlewoman, doth not your beauty put the painter to his drum?
Yes, my lord. Seeing so disordered a countenance, he feareth he shall shadow a deformed counterfeit.
Would he could colour the life with the feature. And methinketh, Apelles, were you as cunning as report saith you are, you may paint flowers as well with sweet smells as fresh colours, observing in your mixture such things as should draw near to their savours.
Your Majesty must know it is no less hard to paint savours than virtues. Colours can neither speak nor think.
Where do you first begin when you draw any picture?
The proposition of the face in just compass, as I can.
I would begin with the eye, as a light to all the rest.
If you will paint, as you are a king, your Majesty may begin where you please. But as you would be a painter, you must begin with the face.
Aurelius would in 1 hour collar 4 faces.
I marvel in half an hour he did not 4.
Why is it so easy?
No, but he doth it so homely.
When will you finish Campaspe?
Never finish, for always in absolute beauty there is somewhat above art.
Why should not I by labour be as cunning as Apelles?
God shield you should have cause to be so cunning as Apelles.
Methinketh 4 colours are sufficient to shadow any countenance, and so it was in the time of Phrigius.
Then had man fewer fancies, and women not so many favours. For now, if the hair of her eyebrows be black, yet must the hair of her head be yellow. The attire of her head must be different from the habit of her body, else must the picture seem like a blazon of ancient armory, not like the sweet delight of new-found amiableness. For as in garden knots diversity of odors makes a more sweet savour, or as in music diverse strings cause more delicate consent, so in painting the more colours, the better counterfeit, observing black for a ground and the rest for grace.
Lend me thy pencil, Apelles. I will paint, and thou shalt judge.
Here,
The coal breaks.
you lean too hard.
Now it blacks not.
You lean too soft.
This is awry.
Your eye goeth not with your hand.
Now it is worse.
Your hand goeth not with your mind.
Nay, if all be too hard or soft, so many rules and regards, that one's hand, one's eye, one's mind must all draw together, I had rather be setting of a battle than blotting of a board. But how have I done here?
Like a king.
I think so. But nothing more unlike a painter. Well, Apelles, Campaspe is finished, as I wish. Dismiss her, and bring presently her counterfeit after me.
I will.
And Alexander and Hesphaestion come from the and exit, basically. Yes, exit from where Apelles is. Yes.
Now, Hesphaestion, doth not this matter cotton as I would? Campaspe looketh pleasantly, liberty will increase her beauty, and my love shall advance her honour.
I will not contrary your majesty, for time must wear out that love hath wrought, and reason wean what appetite nursed.
And Campaspe comes steps forward.
Stately she passeth by, yet how soberly, a sweet consent in her countenance, with a chaste disdain, desire mingled with coyness, and I cannot tell how to term it, a cursed yielding modesty.
Let her pass.
So she shall, for the fairest of the earth.
And end scene. Everyone exits. I'm sure we've got lots of interesting things to say here, but I think I'm just going to throw it in with the statement. Alexander's not very good at art, is he? And he clearly gets really quite cross. It's just, the charcoal we're using here is just not very good, is it? Oh dear. Yeah, thoughts from the room about lots of things going on in this scene, lots of little scenes as they're sort of moving in and out of the studio. Apologies for rendering some not very helpful stage directions, as I've just been cross-referencing different things at the same time. So I apologize for being a bit unclear on that front. Lynn.
Yeah, I love it. I love this scene. Partly because I am a retired theater artist myself, and it took me some time to get good at what I did. And so I just find it really kind of gratifying that the king of the conqueror of the known world, someone who is not used to losing, someone who is not used to being unable to do what he wants and have what he wants, can't even draw a picture. I just think that's a lovely little lesson about power and the limits of power, and talent and the limits of talent. I mean, we had that same conversation earlier about a kind of a more significant subject, a more substantial subject, where Hephaestion was saying, yes, you're king of the known world, but you can't make someone love you. Yes, you're king of the known world, but you can't be an artist without practice.
Aliki.
I think you're slightly overstating the extent to which he gets cross, because he's quite reasonable about it, and people flatter him, and he says, yeah, it doesn't really look like art, does it? Oh, well, never mind. He doesn't say, it's perfect and it should be framed or whatever.
Lois.
Yeah, I think that's part of the charm of the scene, the good humor of everybody, and particularly the tact of Apelles, who never comes right out with it and says, "Why are you wasting your time doing this? You're terrible," or something to that effect. But the other thing that strikes me, though, is that Alexandra never takes the opportunity to speak to Campaspe. I mean, I don't think he's spoken to her at all. He just goes on talking about her.
Yeah, and commissioning pictures of her. It's all of that remove all the way through, isn't it? I mean, he's barely exchanged a single word with her in the entire play that we've seen. Yeah, I think that's very, very telling. It's interesting also the way this scene is sort of introduced again by these two peripheral characters just going, "Oh yeah, you know, do you think Alexandra's in love?" Nah. It's sort of we have these occasional sort of moments of the two peripheral figures come on and just set up the scene. In case anyone's forgotten what's going on, it's an interesting little bit of business. I'm not sure, and we also have the Diogenes stuff. So anyone want to leap in on Diogenes at this stage? No. It's a Tuesday. Sorry, Aliki.
I don't know that there's that much to say. There's, Diogenes being properly diogenetic or whatever, going, "I don't have any money. You're an idiot for wanting any. It ruins your life that you need money," and that's about it.
Yeah, it's maybe it's more about Crysus who's with him. Give the Paul Cynic a groat business. I'm just wondering, in terms of the extended philosophers that we've got in this play, is just a reminder it's not just Diogenes as our principal one. Lois.
Yeah, I just think this is mostly little snippets from the lives and sayings of the philosophers or whatever it is. I mean, there were lots of these juicy little bits, and Lyly is scattering them happily through the play.
Okay. Any additional thoughts before we crack on with the next scene? Okay, let's go into Act 3, Scene 5. Enter Psyllus and Manes.
I shall be hanged for tarrying so long.
I pray God my master be not flown before I come.
Away, Manes, my master doth come.
And exit Manes. Apelles comes onto the stage. Apelles. Surprise entrance from the painter.
And where have you been all this while?
Nowhere but here.
Who is here since my coming?
Nobody.
Ungracious wag, I perceive you have been loitering. Was Alexander nobody?
He was a king. I meant no mean body.
I will cudgel your body for it, and then I will say it was nobody because it was no honest body. Away, in.
And exit Psyllus, leaving Apelles on stage.
Unfortunate Apelles, and therefore infortunate because Apelles, hast thou by drawing her beauty brought to pass that thou canst scarce draw thine own breath, and by so much the more hast thou increased thy care, by how much the more thou hast showed thy cunning. Was it not sufficient to behold the fire and warm thee? But with Satyrus thou must kiss the fire and burn thee. O Campaspe, Campaspe, art must yield to nature, reason to appetite, wisdom to affection. Could Pygmalion entreat by prayer to have his ivory turned into flesh, and cannot Apelles obtain by plaints to have the picture of his love changed to life? Is painting so far inferior to carving? Or dost thou, Venus, more delight to be hewed with chisels than shadowed with colors? What Pygmalion, or what Perigotelles, or what Lysippus is he that ever made thy face so fair or spread thy fame so far as I? Unless, Venus, in this thou envious mine art, that in coloring my sweet Campaspe, I have left no place by cunning to make thee so amiable. But alas, she is the paramour to a prince. Alexander, the monarch of the earth, hath her both body and affection. But what is it that kings cannot obtain by prayers, threats, and promises? Will she not think it better to sit under a cloth of estate like a queen than in a poor shop like a hussif, and esteem it sweeter to be the concubine of the lord of the world than spouse to a painter in Athens? Yes, yes, Apelles, thou mayest swim against the stream with the crab, and feed against the wind with the deer, and peck against the steel with the cockatrice. Stars are not to be looked at, not reached at. Princes must be yielded unto, and not contended with. Campaspe, to be honored, not obtained, to be painted, not possessed of thee. O fair face, O unhappy hand, and why didst thou draw it so fair a face? O beautiful countenance, the express image of Venus, but somewhat fresher, the only pattern of that eternity which Jupiter, dreaming of asleep, could not conceive again waking. Blush, Venus, for I am ashamed to end thee. Now must I paint things impossible, for wounds and slaughters for mine art, but agreeable with my affections. Deep and hollow sighs and melancholy thoughts, wounds and slaughters of conceits, a life posting to death, a death galloping from life, a wavering constancy and unsettled resolution, and what not, Apelles, and what but Apelles? But as they that are shaken with a fever are not to be warmed with clothes, not groans, and as he that melteth in the consumption that is to be recurred by coluses, not conceits, so the feeding of cancer of my care, the never-dying worm of my heart, is to be killed by counsel, not cries, by applying of remedies, not by replying of reasons. And sith in cases desperate there must be used medicines that are extreme, I will hazard that little life that is left to restore the greater part that is lost. And this shall be my first practice, for wit must work where authority is not. As soon as Alexander hath viewed the portraiture, I will by device give it a blemish, that by that means she may come again to my shop, and then as good it were to utter my love, and I in denial, as conceal it and live in despair.
And then Apelles sings a song. You don't have to sing the song, just say the words.
Cupid and my Campaspe played at cards for kisses. Cupid paid. He stakes his quiver, bow and arrows, his mother's doves and team of sparrows, looses them, then down he throws the coral of his lip, the rose growing on his cheeks, but none knows how, with these the crystal of his brow, and then the dimple of his chin, and these did my Campaspe win. At last he set her both his eyes, she won, and Cupid blind did rise. O love, hath she done this to thee? What shall, alas, become of me?
And exit. And yes, in a moment I'm going to be asking the room thoughts on Apelles now that we've had a sight of his inner soul pouring out in great chunks of prose. Just a little note while you think about that on the songs. There is a big question mark about the provenance of the songs. They appear in later printings, not in the earlier printing. They are things that appear much later on. They may be authentic, they may be authorial, they may be just the kind of songs that are appropriate. They may have been adjusted on some level. We're going to take them on face value here because they work and it makes sense here. I don't know whether in the original printing we just have a note of song, but I don't think we have any lyrics. So just a little note there for caution on terms of how the songs are used. But it's very, very in keeping that these plays have music, and frequently music is noted. And certainly here, there is at least the name of a character has been inserted in some way, fashion, or form. So, having given you all a moment to think about Apelles, thoughts from the room on this this chap? Lynn.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess I have to reevaluate. He seemed really lusty and lecherous and creepy in his first conversation with her, but now he's talking about, you know, a much more conventional and sincere kind of love that he, you know, wants to be his spouse. You know, my little bourgeois wife and you know, my partner. So he seems to, you know, he seems to be a much more sincere kind of character and have a more, you know, honorable and conventional kind of aspiration here.
At some point we might do flash forwards to Dr. Doddypole, but we won't for the moment. Alexandra, I see a hand, then Eric.
Yeah, I disagree. My evaluation has not changed, because I feel as though, yes, you're absolutely right, Lynn, that in the context of the time, we would perhaps be expected to see this as an honorable form of love. But in the context of contemporary kind of audience perspective, my contemporary perspective, I get the impression that he's doing what Alexandra is doing and continuing to objectify her. He's painted her. Oh, she's so pretty. Gee, I wish I could have her for a wife. But it's still, you know, she's the object of their affection and therefore still an object. So yeah, it was interesting that I was listening to you read it and I was going, do I? No, I don't. I don't like him anymore. No.
Eric.
I was going to say that, please don't kill me, but this reminds me of Moulin Rouge. The sound, not the cabaret. I mean the musical, where, you know, they've set up like the rich sort of bad guy, and they've set up, you know, the sort of romantic poet who must, of course, fall in love with the beautiful young woman who will probably fall prey to some either disease or become a victim of their, you know, sort of the, you know, three-way whatever is going on. I know it's just that thing of how dare she, you know, be, you know, sort of belong to someone else kind of thing. I don't know. It's just, yeah, that's what it reminded me of.
Aliki.
It's interesting that he compares himself to Pygmalion, because Pygmalion invents a woman that he carves, who then becomes a real person. And he wishes that he had a copy, that's all. If only his painting, then there would be two Campaspe, right? Wouldn't there? Yeah, I agree with Alexandra that it's all very superficial and exactly like Alexander's, oh, she's pretty as a picture. But I really enjoy the way that these elaborate things about cockatrices and crabs and so on appear in this really, again, very naturalistic monologue.
Yes, for the viewers at home, we are, you know, this is all, you know, apart from the songs, it's all in prose. It's all in very nice flowing prose. And, you know, it's not saying we've done actually that much in these sessions. We've been dancing between various first forms all over the shop. So uninterrupted prose is a bit of a novelty for us. Other thoughts from the room? Helen?
Yeah, well, concurring entirely with Lynn and Alexandra and the rest of the room, I think we ought to recognise that objectifying women was the norm, and that the contemporary audience would not necessarily have seen anything creepy about valuing a woman for how she looked rather than the content of her character.
But it is interesting that in the previous session, we were looking at scenes which were sort of critical at what some of these art at least what the art form is doing and what it's depicting. So it's interesting question about precisely what the author is doing with this and how that interacts between what the audience then expects and what we expect today and what our performers today will be doing with it as well. Other thoughts before we rattle into Act 4? Lots of hands suddenly. Sarah, then Alexandra, then Eric.
I was going to say, yeah, even though he he clearly feels that his love is sincere. And how we view that as a contemporary audience is obviously down to us. But he's still not above playing tricks, though, is he? Because he says there right at the end that and for an artist to actually ruin their own work, I mean, that's quite something. But he's actually going to, deliberately blemish the picture so that she will come again, to his studio. And I mean, okay, he's saying, oh, I want her to come back so I can declare my love. But even so, it's like, really? Really, you've got to kind of just come up with some deceit to lure her back to your studio. You can't just go and talk to her and say, hey, now the portrait's finished, do you want to go for a coffee? It's like he's got to actually get her back into his realm where he has the power and kind of resorts to subterfuge to do it, to the extent that he'll actually destroy his own painting. I think that says a lot about him.
Well, I don't know, because it may be a context thing of how free she is to travel and move about. So maybe that's the only way to actually get her in his sphere, is to get Alexander to send her for that. So it might be that. Though the sort of lack of specificity about certain elements about where we are and geography makes that difficult to tell. Alexandra, then Eric.
I was going to say that to your point about that other, previous passages that seemed more critical, that might just be our interpretation, because, for example, the description of the scenes of the previous paintings of Jove seducing this and that woman are theoretically about seductions. It's only us looking back at that later and going, yes, but those are non-consensual relationships, or those are relationships begun by deceit, or there are things that we nowadays go, ooh, that's horrendous. But again, to an audience of the time, I don't know whether those would have been marketed as, no, this is virtuous, positive, useful, interesting, or, as I was saying, this is about seduction. There's been a lot of male gaze, and there's been a lot of objectification of her, and she's only ever had one chance to speak against that. But it feels as though they're they're treating her, or they're taking action in different ways, right? So for Alexander, she's there and she's wonderful, and as long as she can keep her virtue, I will elevate her virtue. Whereas for the painter, it's about, oh, can I just tell her that I love her? I'll just bring her around and I won't, do anything else. So that contrast is interesting.
I'll briefly cite sachet to Lois before going to Eric.
Okay, this is just a quotation, really, but since you were saying that possibly spectators at the period would have thought of those as seductions, I remembered a couple of lines from Marlowe's Hero and Leander, where he's talking about a painting showing a lot of the gods, and says, there you might see the gods in sundry shapes, committing heady riots, incests, rapes. So, I mean, they obviously thought about the gods pretty much as we do in the way that, Jupiter was behaving to women.
Eric.
I was just going to say that it sounds like he kind of thinks that Campaspe is doing this on purpose, because he in his song he kind of goes, well, has she, oh love, has she done this to thee? And like it's basically Campaspe who stole, like, well, I know it's a sort of metaphor, but like who stole Cupid's eyes and made made him blind and that kind of stuff, and basically stole all the elements of love, and with her own charms is luring him, not the other way around.
Time, however, moves on. We must move into Act 4. If you have any additional thoughts on that, hold on to them and throw them in a totally random context. Act 4, Scene 1. We have enter Solinus, Psyllus, and Granichus.
This is the place, the day, the time that Diogenes hath appointed to fly.
I will not lose the flight of so fair a fowl as Diogenes is, though my master cudgel my nobody as he threatened.
What, Psyllus, will the beast wag his wings today?
We shall hear, for here cometh Manes. Manes, will it be?
Bee? You were best at be as cunning as a bee. Well, shortly it will not be at all.
How is he furnished to fly? Hath he feathers?
Thou art an ass. Capons, geese and owls have feathers. He hath found Daedalus old waxen wings, and hath been piercing them this month. He is so broad in the shoulders. Oh, you shall see him cut the air, even like a tortoise.
Methinks so wise a man should not be so mad. His body must needs be too heavy.
Why, he has eaten nothing this 7th night but cork and feathers.
Touch him, Manes.
He is so light that he can scarce keep him from flying at midnight.
And at this point, the people enter.
See, they begin to flock. Behold, my master bustles himself to fly.
And we can infer that Diogenes actually gets out of his tub. I mean, it's controversial. It's not absolutely certain that happens yet.
You wicked and bewitched Athenians, whose bodies make the earth to groan and whose breaths infect the air with stench, come ye to see Diogenes fly. Diogenes cometh to see you sink. Ye call me a dog, so I am, for I long to gnaw the bones in your skins. You term me an hater of men. No, I am a hater of your manners. Your lives dissolute, not fearing death, will prove your death desperate, not hoping for life. What do you else in Athens but sleep in the day and surfeit in the night? Back gods in the morning with pride, in the evening belly gods with gluttony. You flatter kings and call them gods. Speak truth of yourselves and confess you are devils. From the bee you have taken not the honey, but the wax to make your religion, flaming it to the time, not to the truth. Your filthy lust you colour under a courtly colour of love. Injuries abroad under the title of policies at home, and secret malice creepeth under the name of public justice. You have caused Alexandra to dry up springs and plant vines, to sow rocket and weed endive, to shear sheep and shrine foxes. All consciences sealed at Athens. Swearing cometh of a hot metal, lying of a quick wit, flattery of a flowing tongue, undecent talk of a merry disposition. All things are lawful at Athens. Either you think there are no gods, or I must think you are no men. You build as though you should live forever, and surfeit as though you should die tomorrow. None teacheth true philosophy but Aristotle, because he was the king's schoolmaster. Oh, times! Oh, men! Oh, corruption in manners! Remember that green grass must turn to dry hay. When you sleep, you are not sure to wake, and when you rise, not certain to lie down. Look you never so high, your heads must lie level with your feet. Thus have I flown over your disordered lives, and if you will not amend your manners, I will study to fly further from you, that I may be nearer to honesty.
Thou ravest, Diogenes, for thy life is different from thy words. Did not I see thee come out of a brothel house? Was it not a shame?
It was no shame to go out, but a shame to go in.
It were a good deed, Manus, to beat thy master.
You were as good but beat my master, one of the people. Hast thou made us all fools, and wilt thou not fly?
I tell thee, unless thou be honest, I will fly.
Dog, dog, I take a bone.
Thy father need fear no dogs, but a dog's thy father.
We will tell Alexander that thou reprovest him behind his back.
And I will tell him that you flatter him before his face.
We will cause all the boys in the street to hiss at thee.
Indeed, I think the Athenians have their children ready for any vice, because they be Athenians.
Why, master, mean you not to fly?
No, Manes, not without wings.
Everybody will account you a liar.
No, I warrant you, for I will always say the Athenians are mischievous.
I cannot. It was sport enough for me to see these old huddles hit home.
Nor I.
Come, let us go, and hereafter, when I mean to rail upon anybody openly, it shall be given out, I will fly.
Yeah, I like the kinds of entertainments that Diogenes sets up. You know, you send out all the invites, it's going to be a fabulous show, and then he just insults you. Great party, Diogenes. Great party. Thoughts from the room. The people, how you obviously were expecting flying. Were you disappointed?
Yeah.
I think they were. Yeah, they wanted a good entertainment here, and they're not getting it.
Yeah, Diogenes, what were you thinking?
Mostly I was thinking, oh, I shouldn't have used this voice.
Look, it was a choice. It was a good thing to go for.
It was fine for the short lines, and then I was like, oh, big speech. Oh, okay. You don't get those in Coward. Never mind. I think it's funny. It seems kind of slightly out of character. The fact that he would, because he's basically tricked them all into going there, so that he can make this kind of extended metaphor about, oh, I'm going to fly from you all or fly over your heads because you're all so crap. And like, that just doesn't seem to be very like in keeping with what we've seen of him so far. But I'm assuming this did happen. I'm very uneducated about philosophers, but I assume this is based on some kind of episode.
Yes, it's a thing. It's a thing. You see, because there's an inferred stage direction suggesting that he gets out his tub. I don't think he does. I think the tub just gets hoisted slightly higher. I think people have to carry him so that he can insult people from a height. But I don't think he should get out of his tub at all.
I agree.
A cherry picker. He should get a cherry picker and just go. There he is. I now insult you. Down he goes. That's how he should work. Helen.
I think that the audience in the theatre might have been slightly disappointed, which is why I think it's quite important that Psyllus says, well, we've had our money's worth.
Mm.
Because otherwise there is a feeling that, I must confess, I am disappointed. I put a lot of stock in Diogenes flying, and I'm seriously disappointed by it. But as my character Psyllus thinks that it was a good show anyway, I can cope.
Well, I think, and this is something about something that can be done with Diogenes when he's not Noel Coward, is that there should be a lot more spittle and this could be a real powerhouse kind of thing in a different way, and that's again, that isn't a criticism of the Coward approach. I found it very entertaining.
It should have been more fire and brimstone, I feel, but you can't really do that with. Never mind.
It's fine. You can choose a different voice for next scene. It's fine. Other thoughts in the room, Eric?
Well, also, I guess he's kind of like, because he's the cynic, he's the one who, as we said, talks truth to power. So he's just kind of like, he basically set them up to prove how hypocritical they are. Like, if he told them he was just going to like point out their mistakes, they wouldn't appear. But if he told them like, I'm gonna fly, and like, they're going to expect to make fun of him. They just all turn up enthusiastically, which no one ever does for philosophy because it's philosophy. Well, I mean, maybe, I don't know.
No, you've got to go for one of those sort of those out of the way, low level philosophy. The street level philosophy that's out there. I'm just saying words now. Somebody stop me. I was trying to go on a whole tangent there that I couldn't. I had nowhere to go. So other thoughts in the room, please, dear God. Lynn.
Yeah, I was just thinking as Sarah was going through her speech that maybe the poshy accent is not really the right mode for critiquing the status quo.
Very much not.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move into the next scene of Act 4 as Act 4 continues. And shock horror, everybody. We're getting a speech from Campaspe. We're going to get some inner. Let's go inside Campaspe. So Act 4, Scene 2, Campaspe alone.
It is hard to judge whether thy choice be more unwise or the chance unfortunate. Dost thou prefer... Let's stay. utter not that in words which maketh thine ears to glow with thoughts. Tush, better thy tongue wag than thy heart break. Hath a painter crept further into thy mind than a prince, Apelles than Alexander? Fond wench, the baseness of thy mind bewrays the meanness of thy birth. But alas, affection is a fire which kindleth as well in the bramble as in the oak, and catcheth hold where it first lighteth, not where it may best burn. Larks that mount aloof in the air build their nests below in the earth, and women that cast their eyes upon kings may place their hearts upon vassals. A needle will become thy fingers better than a lute, and a distaff is fitter for thy hand than a scepter. Ants live safely till they have gotten wings, and juniper is not blown up until it hath gotten an high top. The mean estate is without care as long as it continueth without pride. Here cometh Apelles, in whom I would there were the like affection.
Enter Apelles.
Gentlewoman, the misfortune I had with your picture will put you to some pains to sit again to be painted.
It is small pains for me to sit still, but infinite for you to draw still.
Oh no, madam, to paint Venus was a pleasure, but to shadow the sweet face of Campaspe, it is a heaven.
If your tongue were made of the same flesh that your heart is, your words would be as your thoughts are. But such a common thing it is among you to command, that oftentimes, for fashion's sake, you call the beautiful whom you know black.
What might men do to be believed?
Whet their tongues on their hearts.
So they do, and speak as they think.
I would they did.
I would they did not.
Why would you have them dissemble?
Not in love, but their love. But will you give me leave to ask you a question without offense?
So that you will answer me another without excuse.
Whom do you love best in the world?
He that made me last in the world.
That was a god.
I had thought it had been a man. But whom do you honor most, Apelles?
The thing that is likest you, Campaspe.
My picture?
I dare not venture upon your person. But come, let us go in, for Alexander will think it long till we return.
And they exit. End of scene. So, Campaspe, we've gone into inside the head a little bit. What have we learnt?
Oh, she loves him.
Right, so it's one of those. This is the nice thing about not letting people read ahead. Is that thing of assessing how the text feels, and then if we go back, we'd have to go right. Well, we have to play that scene in a totally different way. And it's interesting about what the scene might be doing, or on a surface level, and what might be doing in a greater scheme of things. So all sorts of interesting things sort of leap out this way, especially as what would the audience be thinking as well. Francis.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting in that long speech of Apelles, where he basically says, well, why should she want humble painter when she can be the consort of a king? And it occurred to me that he wasn't crediting her with very much intelligence or presence of mind, because you might question whether it's sensible or wise to be the consort of a king. But here we find that she is in love with him as well.
Other thoughts in the room? Eric?
Well, if we think back to someone who actually was the consort of a king, like Jane Shore, that did not turn out very well, did it?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I can see why she'd go for the painter. I mean, but then it also feels like sort of a very 180 turn kind of thing, which is, I don't know, maybe that's just me.
Aliki and then Lynn.
I think the previous dialogue the two of them had, if we look at it as Rob said, through the lens of this, we can see it as a flirtatious confrontation. Because they're doing that again a little bit, that kind of verbal wordplay. And it's interesting that what she says about the dangers of looking too high, because it almost sounds like she's rationalizing. She tells us first that she really likes him better. And then she's like, oh, well, of course, it makes sense to love him better. It's dangerous if I were to love the king.
Lynn.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm very interested in the early modern drama, particularly comedy and love comedy, exposes, although doesn't necessarily critique, is the problem of when does no mean no. We always have or often have the resistant love object, and her resistance seems to whet the lover's appetite rather than discourage them. That puts her in the impossible position of no never really means no. No always means maybe, or no always means woo harder, or no means not yet. No can never mean no when the conventional game is she has to say no and seem resistant. And it hadn't occurred to me till reading this passage, and this is as I said, this is so smart, that game, that scenario that lovers are obliged to play also puts the man in a difficult position. That what can he say to be believed? Because men so often say things to get what they want in the short term. How does a man whose desire is sincere convince his love that it is sincere? The game, the script makes genuine connection really, really hard.
Other thoughts? Any other questions or thoughts about this particular scene? Scene overall. Any other additional things anyone wants to throw in? Yes, Helen.
Yeah, there's a bit of interesting wordplay, which everybody probably got, that she says it's the last person who created me, which is Apelles, he that made me last in the world. And so, I mean, she's being fairly direct there.
She is, and he's being fairly direct back, but they're not quite, almost each exchange approaches closer to saying what they want to say, and they don't quite get explicit with it.
And the thing is, the fundamental difference between them, these two and her and Alexandra is, of course, they're actually talking to each other. They have been consistently talking to each other. And what we're doing here is trying to decipher the interpretation of what the games are going on in their interactions. And we're getting more clues as we're going. Eric.
I was just going to say that line, that could be read two ways, though. He that made me last is in, like, you know, the person who created me last, or the person who made, like, my image last in the world, as in, like, to, you know.
Right.
I don't know which one they mean, but yeah.
Both work.
Anything else in the room before we move forward? No. Okay. We will go to Act 4, Scene 3. Enter Clytus and Parmenio.
We hear nothing of our embassage, a colour belike to blear our eyes, or tickle our ears, or inflame our hearts. But what doth Alexander in the mean season, but use for Tantara, Solfa for his hard couch, down beds, or his handful of water, his standing cup of wine?
By this, I mislike this new delicacy and pleasing peace. For what else do we see now than a kind of softness in every man's mind? Bees to make their hives in soldiers' helmets, our steeds furnished with foot clothes of gold instead of saddles of steel. More time to be required to scour the rust of our weapons than there was wont to be in subduing the countries of our enemies. Sithence Alexander fell from his hard armor to his soft robes. Behold the face of his court. Youths that were wont to carry devices of victory in their shields engraved now posies of love in their rings. They that were accustomed on trotting horses to charge the enemy with a lance, now in easy coaches ride up and down to court ladies. Instead of sword and target to hazard their lives, use pen and paper to paint their loves. Yea, such a fear and faintness is grown in court that they wish rather to hear the blowing of a home to hunt than the sound of a trumpet to fight. O Philip, wert thou alive to see this alteration, thy men turned to women, thy soldiers to lovers, gloves worn in velvet caps, instead of plumes and graven helmets, thou wouldst either die among them for sorrow, or confound them for anger.
Cease, Parmenio, lest in speaking what becometh thee not, thou feel what liketh thee not. Truth is never without a scratched face, whose tongue, although it cannot be cut out, yet must it be tied up.
It grieveth me not a little for Hephaestion, who thirsteth for honour, not ease, but such is his fortune and nearness in friendship to Alexander that he must lay a pillow under his head when he would put a target in his hand. But let us draw in to see how well it becomes them to tread the measures in a dance that we're wont to set the order for a march.
And those two exit. We're going to rattle straight into Act 4, Scene 4. And it's reappearance of Apelles and Campaspe.
I have now, Campaspe, almost made an end.
You told me, Apelles, you would never end.
Never end my love, for it shall be eternal.
That is neither to have beginning or ending.
You are disposed to mistake. I hope you do not mistrust.
What will you say if Alexander perceive your love?
I will say it is no treason to love.
But how if he will not suffer thee to see my person?
Then I will gaze continually on thy picture.
That will not feed thy heart.
Yet it shall fill mine eye. Besides the sweet thoughts, the sure hopes, thy protested faith will cause me to embrace thy shadow continually in mine arms, and of the which by strong imagination I will make a substance.
Well, I must be gone, but this assure yourself, that I had rather be in thy shop grinding colours than in Alexander's court following higher fortunes.
And Apelles exits.
Foolish wench, what hast thou done? Alas, which cannot be undone, and therefore I fear me undone. But content is such a life, I care not for abundance. Oh, Apelles, thy love cometh from the heart, but Alexander's from the mouth. The love of kings is like the blowing of winds, which whistle, sometimes gently among the leaves, and straightways turn the trees up by the roots. Or a fire which warmeth afar off and burneth near hand. Or the sea which maketh men hoist their sails in a flattering calm, and to cut their masts in a rough storm. They place affection by times, by policy, by appointment. If they frown, who dares call them unconstant? If betray secrets, who will term them untrue? If I fall to other loves, who trembles not if he call them unfaithful? In kings there can be no love, but to queens. For as near must they meet in majesty as they do in affection. It is requisite to stand aloof from kings' love and lightning.
And exit. We go into the very final scene of this act, Act 4, Scene 5. Apelles returns to the stage.
Now, Apelles, gather thy wits together. Campaspe is no less wise than fair. Thyself must be no less cunning than faithful. It is no small matter to be rival with Alexander.
Enter the page.
Apelles, you must come away quickly with the picture. The king thinketh that now you have painted it, you play with it.
I would play with pictures. I have enough at home.
None perhaps you like so well.
It may be I have painted none so well.
I have known many fairer faces.
And I many better boys.
And so closes the act, the penultimate act. Just to, for once, give us a sense of the scenes flowing into each other as well as everything else. That sense of we left Apelles and Campaspe. We have this sort of intermediate scene where everyone's sort of talking about Alexander's. He's gone from to la 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 la. Which is basically, that's the entire context. That's the whole, that scene seems to be basically that. He's gone from trumpets to singing, and that's it. And then we return to Apelles, Campaspe. This flirtation continues. So yeah, and then we get a message from the page. So yeah, how are we feeling about the flow of this, as well as the sort of context of the scenes, and the shadows contained therein? Alexandra.
Been nurturing a theory, which I think has now kind of gathered more evidence, that earlier on when Apelles was saying, oh, she wouldn't even, she couldn't possibly look on me because Alexander hath her body and her love. What that kind of indicated to me is that at some point beforehand, that Campaspe had just become a concubine. You know, she doesn't get consulted, and we don't get to find out, and you know, he never has to talk to her. He just gets the bit of her that he wants. And then he continues to love her or to feel more infatuated with her because they have frequent kind of contact. Whereas the same thing is happening with Apelles, but it's a different kind of contact. And so when she's now sort of considering, oh, should I, you know, do I love this man more or this man more? She's in a position of, is it the guy I'm sleeping with or the guy that's treating me nicely? And then once she has passed the point of no return, as she kind of describes it in more words, then she's in trouble. So that actually she's had a much more of a journey up until she had this speech than we were perhaps led to understand from what other people were saying about her.
I mean, it is telling that it's only in Act 4 that we actually start hearing from her in an interior sense, as opposed to at the beginning of the play where she has dialogue, but we don't really get a sense of that interiority. Very, very little. There is a bit. Aliki, then Helen.
If Alexandra is right, then it makes sense of him not necessarily wanting to speak to her when he sees her. He doesn't need to court her. She's already his concubine or mistress or whatever. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, it's very much I'll have that one. You can keep those. I'll have that one. You know, as presumably occurred in after the scene where we met her.
Helen.
Yeah, I was trying to. This is a story that has been painted by a lot of people because people like it because the hero's a painter. And in looking at the descriptions of the paintings, they all say Campaspe was Alexander's concubine. There's no question of it. But I felt here that all the way along, firstly in her rejection of the Jupiter myths, and then in the first scene where we see her, where she's very insistent on her honesty, her chastity, I'm not so sure that this play intends that she should be. I think it's director's choice.
Lois.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be the academic from hell, but I mean, historically speaking, I just don't think Lyly could write a play in which a woman who was somebody's mistress then could be happily married to someone else, or that someone else would be willing to marry her after that. I mean, it's just the whole attitude to female chastity, which I think we may find hard to understand now, but it's come up in so many of our plays.
No,
And to agree.
Yeah, it's a good point. Eric.
I was just wondering, so at the time, would this have been like performed in front of Queen Elizabeth? Because like, I mean, sort of having a play where the women are sort of powerless is very interesting. Where, you know, you'd expect like something like, I don't know, Dido, or I don't know, something like something, you know, with a strong female character, I don't know, sort of playing to the strengths of the patron who, you know, you don't want to kill your production.
To be fair, Dido doesn't end well for Dido. Lois.
Yeah. Elizabeth had a tremendous thing about chastity. I mean, she was furious if her maids of honor, even got married without her permission or without telling her. She hated plays that raved about the superiority of marriage to virginity, and said something like that, this is all against me. It's another reason why, valorizing of female chastity is really quite important in plays that are being performed in front of her.
We need to move forward, but very briefly, Sarah.
Yeah, I agree with Helen. I think you could play this both ways, because what Alexandra is saying is definitely a really interesting way of looking at it. But against that, there's who Alexander is in this play, not who he is, in history, but who he is in this play. And the fact that she does have she doesn't speak through the most of the first half of the play, but she has those lines at the very beginning where she talks a lot about, the importance of her chastity and all the rest of it directly to him. So that kind of sets up something at the beginning of the play. And then he, I said this yesterday, he's not a tyrant. He's not seeing, beautiful Zenobia and thinking, oh, right, I want her, and dragging her off to be his wife. He's considering it. He's talking to his friends. He doesn't come across as that highly narcissistic, tyrannical leader, dictator, in the way that others are available for that role. But he doesn't seem to be that man. And so if he has then taken her as his concubine against her will, because she makes it very clear in that first scene or first act that would be against her will, that gives him a completely different cast, and it gives the play a different cast, which I am not seeing in other parts. It makes sense for her speech, but I'm not seeing it in the rest of the play. So it depends which way you take it, I suppose.
Yeah, the play, the characters, when they talk about Alexander, all the various different characters, when they talk about Alexander when he's in the room or whether he's out, are constantly talking about him as this noble person. They're constantly praising him in ways that, if we compare this with Damon and Pythias, which we have the tyrant figure and the philosophers, fundamentally different universe that they're in. That doesn't mean that he isn't contemplating something that is severely dodgy, but he is actually discussing that with his advisors. Is this the right course of action to do? And if she was already his concubine, I don't see why they would have had that scene with Hesphaestion earlier, because I don't see that would have landed for what that was trying to do. But we may have more information coming up. We have another act to go. We'll be pausing a little less. It's important structurally to note there are an awful lot of very short scenes, and by doing what we're doing and stopping every so often, we are taking the wind out of its sails a little bit, and that's just the nature of the beast. One day we'll do this at pace. So Act 5, Scene 1, enter. We've got Diogenes, probably in his tub. We're going to assume the tub is there. And we have Manes, his servant, and then we've got Sylvius, Perim, Milo, Trico. All these people are here. It's a busy thing.
I have brought my sons, Diogenes, to be taught of thee.
What can thy sons do?
You shall see their qualities. Dance, sirrah.
So one of his sons, Perim, danceth.
How like you this? Doth he well?
The better, the worser.
Oh, the music very good.
The musicians very bad, who only study to have their strings in tune, never framing their manners to order.
Now shall you see the other. Tumble, sirrah.
And the other son, Milo, tumbleth.
How like you this? Why do you laugh?
To see a wag that was born to break his neck by destiny, to practice it by art.
This dog will bite me. I will not be with him.
Fear not, boy. Dogs eat no thistles.
I marvel what dog thou art, if thou be a dog.
When I am hungry, a mastiff. When my belly is full, a spaniel.
Dost thou believe that there are any gods, that thou art so dogged?
I must needs believe there are gods, for I think thee an enemy to them.
Why so?
Because thou hast taught one of thy sons to rule his legs and not to follow learning, the other to bend his body every way, and his mind no way.
Thou dost nothing but snarl and bark like a dog.
It is the next way to drive away a thief.
Now shall you hear the third, who sings like a nightingale.
And Trico singeth.
Oh, that's me. What bird so sings yet does not wail? Oh, 'tis the wavished nightingale. Lug, 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 to woo, she cries, and still her woes at midnight wise. Wave quick song, who is now we hear, none but the lark so shrill and dear. How at heaven's gates she claps her wings, the moon not waking till she sings. Hark, hark, with what a pretty throat. Poor Wobbin Wedwest tunes his note. Hark how the jolly cuckoos sing, cuckoo, to welcome in the spring. Cuckoo, to welcome in the spring.
Lo, Diogenes, I am sure thou canst not do so much.
But there is never a thrush but can.
What hast thou taught Manes, thy man?
To be as unlike as may be thy sons.
He has taught me to fast, lie hard, and run away.
How sayest thou, Perim, wilt thou be with him?
Aye, so he will teach me first to run away.
Thou needest not be taught. Thy legs are so nimble.
How sayest thou, Milo, wilt thou be with him?
Nay, hold your peace. He shall not.
Why?
There is not room enough for him and me both to tumble in one tub.
Well, Diogenes, I perceive my sons brook not thy manners.
I thought no less when they knew my virtues.
Farewell, Diogenes. Thou needst not have scraped roots if thou wouldst have followed Alexander.
Nor thou have followed Alexander if thou had scraped roots.
And they exit. So we have this weird audition process for Diogenes. And it's a no from Diogenes.
That's a no from me, dog.
Yeah. And we've constantly had this dog reference in relation to Diogenes. So I'm wondering if that's partly performative, or is there a thing about keeping dogs in tubs? Am I missing something here? So
Yes.
I'm obviously missing something here. Excellent. I ask so that someone else can answer. Go, Aliki.
He's Diogenes the Cynic, which comes from the word for dog. And he's living out in the streets like a dog. I think that's why they called him that, because he lived out in the streets and barked at people.
So he needs to bark more. Extempore barking, please.
I mean, I'm not that good at
off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually the when you translate it to the Greek letters, you like things happen. It would be like kunik more than cynic. It looks like a Y, but it's actually pronounced like a U, and it's related to our word canine, I believe.
Yeah, it is.
So we've got the dancing, we've got tumbling, we've got singing. This show has it all. It's just this random moment of random entertainment. So it's we're almost at the end. Maybe just in case the audience is flagging, just throw that one in. Aliki.
Lois said earlier that there were all these incidents from lives of the philosophers that were being scattered through the text. And it made me think, you know how you get these modern films that are set in some historical period, and our heroine and hero invariably meet 4 or 5 famous people from that period, and they always do their thing, whatever their thing is. You're going to meet Dickens and he's going to say, oh, workhouses are terrible. Yeah, just that.
Yeah, Absolutely, yeah. It's and it's also the way these things are sprinkled in between the slow movingness of the sort of main love plot, as it were. So we have progression of love plot with these little bits in between to sort of break up and just to give some sense of the passage of time, I think, as well, just so that people can go off stage and then come back on again and something has changed in their absence. You know, Chekhov would be proud. We've got two relatively short scenes before we get into the final bit, so we'll do these two scenes back to back. Act 5, Scene 2. It's the Apelles show. Apelles alone.
I fear me, Apelles, that thine eye hath blabbed that which thy heart durst not. What little regard hadst thou? Whilst Alexander viewed the counterfeit of Campaspe, thou stoodest gazing on her countenance. If he espy, or but suspect, thou must needs twice perish, with his hate and thine own love. Thy pale looks when he blushed, thy sad countenance when he smiled, thy sighs when he questioned, may breed in him a jealousy, perchance a frenzy. Oh, love, I never before knew what thou wert, and now thou hast thou made me that I know not what myself I am. Only this I know, that I must endure intolerable passions for unknown pleasures. Dispute not the cause, wretch, but yield to it, for better it is to melt with desire than wrestle with love. Cast thyself on thy careful bed, be content to live unknown and die unfound. O Campaspe, I have painted in my heart, painted, nay, contrary to mine art, imprinted, and that in such deep characters that nothing can raise it out, unless it rub my heart out.
And he exits. Act 5, Scene 3. Enter Milectus, Phrigius, and lays to Diogenes, presumably in his tub.
It shall go hard, but this peace shall bring us some pleasure.
Down with arms and up with legs. This is a world for the nonce.
Sweet youth, if you knew what it were to save your sweet blood, you would not so foolishly go about to spend it. What delight can there be in gashing, to make foul scars and fair faces, and crooked maims and straight legs, as though men being born goodly by nature would of purpose become deformed by folly, and all forsooth for a new-found term, called valiant, a term which breedeth more quarrels than the sense can commendation.
It is true, Lois, a feather bed hath no fellow. Good drink makes good blood, and shall pelting words spill it?
I mean to enjoy the world and to draw out my life at the wire drawers, not to curtail it off at the cutlers.
You may talk of war, speak big, conquer worlds with great words, but stay at home, where instead of alarms you shall have dances, for hot battles with fierce men, gentle skirmishes with fair women. These pewter coats can never sit so well as satin doublets. Believe me, you cannot conceive the pleasure of peace unless you despise the rudeness of war.
It is so. But see Diogenes prying over his tub. Diogenes, what sayest thou to such a morsel?
I say I would spit it out of my mouth, because it should not poison my stomach.
Thou speakest as thou art. It is no meat for dogs.
I am a dog, and philosophy rates me from carrion.
Uncivil wretch, whose manners are unanswerable to thy calling, the time was thou wouldst have had my company, had it not been, as thou sayest, too dear.
I remember there was a thing that I repented of me of, and now thou hast told it. Indeed, it was too dear of nothing, and thou dear to nobody.
Down, villain, or I will have thy head broken.
Will you couch?
Avaunt, cur! Come, sweet lice, let's go to some place and possess peace. But first, let us sing. There is more pleasure in timing of a voice than in a volley of shot.
Maybe there's a song, who knows?
Now, let us make haste, lest Alexander find us here.
And they exit. So 2 interesting scenes back to back before we get into the final action. Apelles alone. Sad face. And then we have this interesting discussion with the sex workers. So it's an interesting 2 scenes back to back. Thoughts from the room?
Blaze certainly is ready to pop off, even though it's about like, oh, it's peace, but Diogenes just brings out the worst in everyone, I think.
it's his place in life, isn't it? It's just...
Right.
Helen.
Has Milectus is offering a portion of lunch? I mean, a sandwich? What says thou to such a morsel? Are they eating in the street?
I think they are.
And breaks off a piece and offers it to Diogenes, as you would to a dog.
Yeah.
As you might to a dog.
Might be talking about Lois there.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Yeah, because I was threatening. Yeah.
Yeah, not a sandwich, but right.
Oh, yes.
Got you. My mind is nowhere near dirty enough for this play.
Well, I have to say, the scene as dialogue as it flows you does not impart that information very clearly. I think there's, that is what that figure is another one of these characters that we are perhaps expected to have within this society.
Does anyone know what Phrigius means by draw out my life at the wire drawers, not curtail it off at the cutlers?
My thought.
Stretch out your life, not
local
have it.
pubs.
Well, that's what it sounds like, but why?
I have a guess. So what wire was an important component of weapons building because they didn't really weld. So the blade was lashed to the hilt with wire. So the wire drawer is part of the weapons making process. That's my guess.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, well, it seemed to me it's something to do with you can draw out your life, but if you don't have it, rather than have it cut short, cutler, cut thing, that sort of thing. I don't think I think it's straining, shall we say? It's straining at a thing.
Okay, I've just worked it out. I'm sorry, I've been quite dim. So they come in with their arms around this lady of the evening. And oh yeah, well, no more fighting, but hey, at least there'll be raising of the legs. It's much dirtier than we played it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Other thoughts? Did I see hands? I think I did. Helen.
Yeah. Oh, can you remind me of the date of the play?
Somewhere prior to 1584.
Well, yes. There are stirrings of war. A fairly sizable piece of peace is coming to an end.
Right.
Other thoughts before we go into the final scene? I should tell you it's the final scene. The next scene. I should have just said that. I shouldn't be giving in the numbers at all. It should all come out blind and just come rattling at you. Anyway, we'll go into Act 5, Scene 4. Enter Alexander, Hesphaestion, and the page.
Thinketh, Hephaestion, you are more melancholy than you were accustomed, but I perceive it is all for Alexander. You can neither brook this peace nor my pleasure. Be of good cheer, though I wink, I sleep not.
Melancholy I am not, nor well content. For I know not how there is such a rust crept into my bones with this long ease, that I fear I shall not scour it out with infinite labours.
Yes, yes, if all the travails of conquering the world will set either thy body or mine in tune, we will undertake them. But what think you of Apelles? Did you ever see any so perplexed? He neither answered directly to any question, nor looked steadfastly upon anything. I hold my life, the painter is in love.
It may be, for commonly we see it incident in artificers to be enamored of their own works, as Archidamus of his wooden dove, Pygmalion of his ivory image, Arachne of his wood swan, especially painters who, playing with their own conceits, now coveting to draw a glancing eye, then a rolling, now a winking, still mending it, never ending it, till they be caught with it. And then, poor souls, they kiss the colors with their lips, with which before they were loath to taint their fingers.
I will find it out. Page, go speedily to Apelles, will him to come hither, and when you see us earnestly in talk, suddenly cry out, Apelles' shop is on fire.
It shall be done.
Forget not your lesson.
And exit the page.
I marvel what your device shall be.
The event shall prove.
I pity the poor painter, if he be in love.
Pity him not, I pray thee, that severe gravity set aside. What do you think of love?
As the Macedonians do of their herb beet, which, looking yellow in the ground and black in the hand, think it better seen than touched.
But what do you imagine it to be?
A word by superstition thought a god, by use turned to a humor, by self-will made a flattering madness.
You are too hard-hearted to think so of love. Let us go to Diogenes. Diogenes, thou mayst think it is somewhat... Thou mayst think it... Diogenes, thou mayst think it somewhat that Alexander cometh to thee again so soon.
If you come to learn, you could not come soon enough. If to laugh, you be come too soon.
It would better become thee to be more courteous, and frame thyself to please.
And you better to be less, if you durst displease.
What dost thou think of the time we have here?
That we have little, and lose much.
If one be sick, what wouldst thou have him do?
Be sure that he make not his physician his heir.
If thou mightst have thy will, how much ground would content thee?
As much as you in the end must be contented withal.
What? A world?
No, the length of my body.
Hephaestion, shall I be a little pleasant with him?
Ah, you may, but he will be very perverse with you.
It skilleth not. I cannot be angry with him. Diogenes, I pray thee, what dost thou think of love?
A little worser than I can of hate.
And why?
Because it is better to hate the things which make to love than to love the things which give occasion of hate.
Why? Be not women the best creatures in the world?
Next men, and bees.
What dost thou chiefly like? What dost thou dislike chiefly in a woman?
One thing.
What?
That she is a woman.
In my opinion, thou wert never born of a woman that thou thinkst so hardly of women. But now cometh Apelles, who I am sure is as far from thy thought as thou art from his cunning. Diogenes, I will have thy cabin removed nearer to my court, because I will be a philosopher.
And when you have done so, I pray you remove your court further from my cabin, because I will not be a courtier.
Enter Apelles.
But here cometh Apelles. Apelles, what piece of work have you in hand?
None in hand, if it like your majesty, but I am devising a platform in my head.
I think your hand put it in your head. Is it nothing about Venus?
And re-enter the page.
No, but something above Venus.
Apelles, Apelles, look about you. Your shop is on fire.
Ay me, if the picture of Campaspe be burnt, I am undone.
Stay, Apelles, no haste. It is your heart is on fire, not your shop. And if Campaspe hang there, I would she were burnt. But have you the picture of Campaspe? Belike you love her well, that you care not, though all be lost, so she be safe.
Not love her, but your majesty knows that painters in their last work are said to excel themselves. And in this I have so much pleased myself, that the shadow as much delighteth me, being an artificer, as the substance doth others that are amorous.
You lay your colours grossly. Though I could not paint in your shop, I can spy into your excuse. Be not ashamed, Apelles, it is a gentleman's sport to be in love. Call hither Campaspe. Methinks I might have been made privy to your affection, though my counsel had not been necessary, yet my countenance might have been thought requisite. But, Apelles, forsooth, loveth underhand. Yea, and under Alexander's nose, and but I say no more.
Apelles loveth not so, but he liveth to do as Alexander will.
Enter Campaspe.
Campaspe, here is news. Apelles is in love with you.
It pleaseth your majesty to say so.
Hephaestion, I will try her too. Campaspe, for the good qualities I know in Apelles and the virtue I see in you, I am determined you shall enjoy one the other. How say you, Campaspe? Would you say aye?
Your handmaid must obey if you command.
Think you not, Hephaestion, that she would fain be commanded?
I am no thought catcher, but I guess, unhappily.
I will not enforce marriage where I cannot compel love.
But your majesty may move a question where you be willing to have a match.
Believe me, Hephaestion, these parties are agreed. They would have me both priest and witness. Apelles, take Campaspe. Why move you not? Campaspe, take Apelles. Will it not be? If you be ashamed one of the other by my consent, you shall never come together. But dissemble not, Campaspe. Do you love Apelles?
Pardon, my lord. I love Apelles.
Apelles, it were a shame for you, being loved so openly of so fair a virgin, to say the contrary. Do you love Campaspe?
Only Campaspe.
Two loving worms, Hephaestion. I perceive Alexander cannot subdue the affections of men, though he conquer their countries. Love falleth like dew as well upon the low grass as upon the high cedar. Sparks have their heat, ants their gall, flies their spleen. Well, enjoy one another. I give her thee frankly, Apelles. Thou shalt see that Alexander maketh but a toy of love, and leadeth affection in fetters, using fancy as a fool to make him sport, or a minstrel to make him merry. It is not the amorous glance of an eye can settle an idle thought in the heart. No. No, it is a children's game, a life for seamsters and scholars. The one pricking in clouts have nothing else to think on. The other, picking fancies out of books, have little else to marvel at. Go, Apelles. Take with you your Campaspe. Alexander is cloyed with looking on that which thou wonderest at.
Thanks to your majesty on bended knee, you have honored Apelles.
Thanks with bowed heart. You have blessed Campaspe.
And Apelles and Campaspe exit.
Page, go warn Clytus and Parmenio and the other lords to be in a readiness, let the trumpet sound, strike up the drum, and I will presently into Persia. How now, Hephaestion? Is Alexander able to resist love as he list?
The conquering of Thebes was not so honorable as the subduing of these thoughts.
It were a shame Alexander should desire to command the worlds if he could not command himself. But come, let us go. I will try whether I can better bear my hand with my heart than I could with mine eye. And, good Hephaestion, when all the world is one, and every country is thine and mine, either find me out an other to subdue, or, of my word, I will fall in love.
And exit everybody, and we'll pause before we go and look at the epilogues. It's that moment that reminds me very strong. Again, just these little nods back to earlier plays that again, also quite associated with boys quite a lot of the time. John Hayward's Play of Love also features someone running on saying, house is on fire, there's terrible things happening off stage that involve your interest of love, done by someone quite anarchic and fun. And of course, it's always important to have bees mentioned in plays as being important things. I think we should all respect bees. They're wonderful things. And yeah, thoughts in the room about how the play ends. It's suddenly, we were talking last time, there's so many characters, so many random characters, so many things going on. Actually, the focus of the play has very much narrowed this time, even though we have sudden random appearances of characters. Actually, we've narrowed the focus all the way down to Alexander, Apelles, Hesphaestion, and Alexander the Great, and Diogenes just sitting in the corner as he does. Oscar the Grouch just pops his head up every so often and then goes back down again. So yeah, thoughts in the room about the resolution, as it were.
So I'm going to go back to my seeing Campaspe as quite a feminist character. She says, you could just ask. You could ask. And it works.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we don't entirely believe him, of course, Alexander, that he doesn't care. But it's all very gracious and statesmanlike, isn't it?
Unless you're Persian. I feel like he might be working something out there. Just going, well, she's rejected me. Need to invade somewhere now. Bit awkward. Yeah, Alexandra.
I was saying in the chat some time ago, I smell some Amorath-shaped clouds forming. And the reason for that was that there was that similarity to Amorath in, oh look, the leader has fallen in love and therefore become complacent, and he's no longer going off to war. He's sticking around at home and being all unmanly. When Amorath hears about that, he goes and kills the woman that he'd fallen in love with, because of course it's her fault, and then goes off conquering. So this is really nice as a contrast to that, where it feels as though, you know, it's either a reversal of that, or you know, it feels intentional. Basically, it's we're going that way. No, we're not going there. And so that felt more rewarding, I feel, than the text might necessarily have intended.
Yeah, I'm also really liking Alexander and Hephaestion's relationship at the end here as well. You know, just there's seeing a through line here of just Hephaestion going, yeah, it's yeah, you don't want to get married, mate. You don't want to do that. And is there a nice gay subtext going on here? I think definitely in performance, if nothing else, it really lands quite nicely there. That there's something consummated or unconsummated going on here. And that would be really interesting to play with. Other thoughts in the room? Eric?
I was going to say that it's probably like, okay, it's supposed to sort of resolve the plot, but it also sounds like sort of a suggestion towards either royalty or whoever is watching, like that basically being at the top is very, very lonely. You kind of can't, even if you have an advisor, you're not allowed to fall in love. You're not allowed to sort of have the pleasures or the children's game, the life for seamsters and scholars, the one, you know, where your head is in the clouds. You have to you have an empire or a kingdom to run. So you kind of, yeah, you can't really, there isn't very much to sort of give you much space. Whereas, for example, in Edward, the reign of King Edward, I think it was the fourth. I can't remember which one we did. There are so many kings, I've confused them. You know, he ends up following his, heart and stuff, and his appetites, and everything just goes to hell. So if you set it up as a contrast, it's quite interesting.
Yes, he's holding back manfully. It's a line from something I can't remember what. Alexandra.
Going back to a point you made some time ago, Eric, about how this play would appeal to Elizabeth, that idea of, oh, let's not, you know, if you're so powerful, why not think about conquering the world and leave all that stuff about getting married and having an heir that doesn't matter really. Glory matters. It's interesting that there's been in thinking of it that way, there's been no protestation against what Alexander is doing with regards to how it affects his legacy or his heritage or his lineage, sorry, or anything like that. It's just, oh, he's getting a bit complacent. None of it is, oh no, he can't be with her because he hasn't got a proper wife, or because anything about his actual line. So that's interesting.
Right. Well, in terms of how you appeal to the audience, and we have two epilogues to do. So we'll start with the tryouts with Blackfriars before the general audience, and then we'll segue into what's said at court before Queenie. So epilogue of the Blackfriars, please.
Where the rainbow toucheth the tree, no caterpillars will hang on the leaves. Where the glowworm creepeth in the night, no adder will go in the day. We hope in the ears where our travails be lodged, no carping shall harbour in those tongues. Our exercises must be, as your judgment is, resembling water, which is always of the same colour into what it runneth. In the Trojan horse lay couched soldiers with children, and in hapes of many words we fear diverse and unfit, among some allowable. But as Demosthenes, or with often breathing up the hill, amended his stammering, so we hope with sundry labours against the hair to correct our studies. If the tree be blasted that blossoms, the fault is in the wind, and not in the root. And if our pastimes be misliked, that have been allowed, you must impute it to the malice of others, and not to our endeavour. And so we rest in good case, if you rest well content.
And so ends prologue number 1. That was for the paying public. And now for the audience at court.
We cannot tell whether we are fallen among Diomedes' birds or his horses. The one received some men with sweet notes. The other bit all men with sharp teeth. But as Homer's gods conveyed them into clouds, whom they would have kept from curses, and as Venus, lest Adonis should be pricked with the stings of adders, covered his face with the wings of swans, so we hope, being shielded with your highness' countenance, we shall, though hear the neighing, yet not feel the kicking of those jades, and receive, though no praise which we cannot deserve, yet a pardon, which in all humility we desire. As yet we cannot tell what we should term our labours, iron or bullion. Only it belongeth to your majesty to make them fit either for the forge or the mint, current by the stamp or counterfeit by the anvil. For as nothing is to be called white, unless it had been named white by the first creator, so can there be nothing thought good in the opinion of others, unless it be christened good by the judgment of yourself. For ourselves, again, we are those torches wax, of which being in your highness' hands, you may make doves or vultures, roses or nettles, laurel for a garland, or elder for a disgrace.
And lo, it ends. Yeah, it's interesting. Both the prologue and the epilogue at court mentions those the torches. It suggested I don't know if they got better lighting at court, and the context of there as opposed to Blackfriars. That's an interesting one. Yes, again, like the prologue, some of the same sort of themes and ideas, but in slightly different layouts and thoughts. Did either of those land for you? Thoughts in the room? Which you don't have to say which one you prefer. It's fine. Did they land? Alan?
I don't think either of the epilogues actually landed as well as the two prologues. I felt that the opening worked incredibly well. These didn't quite hit the same level, hit the same standard, in my view.
Eric?
I was just going to say that John Bale is clearly obsessed with birds and bees.
John Lyly, you mean?
Yeah, John Lyly. Sorry, not John Bale.
Do not confuse these two playwrights. Terrible things
Apologies.
I love the detail where the rainbow touches the tree. No caterpillars will hang on the leaves. I mean, really? Wow, that's a new one on me. I love that.
He's been on the mushrooms again.
No, where the glowworm creepeth in the night, no adder will go in the day. I mean, are these commonplace things from something? I'm really quite interested in where that comes from. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is from things like Pliny's Natural History and Herbals and books of what is obviously no longer believed about the behavior of plants, animals, birds, and so on. It's very funny, but luckily, I mean, he does tell you the myth when he refers to it. So although you're thinking, what, they do that? But at least you know what he says they do.
Yes, he's very playful that way, isn't it? And that's lovely. Other thoughts? We're about to go into extra time.
It's very enjoyable to say that stuff. I mean, it's very, very pleasant to read.
I'm not getting waves of approval for these epilogues from the room. I'm just throwing that out there.
I just don't really see what the point of them is. I guess they're pretty, but yeah, they don't add anything to my understanding of the play.
No, well, they wouldn't. No, I think, the one I did anyway at court, you send some extremely cute little boy out there. The queen is looking at him, may well give him a special present of money if she really likes the way he does this speech. I mean, it's all about that kind of thing, I think.
So it's when you're at the Free Fringe and you go with your bucket and you say, if you enjoyed the show...
You may make doves or vultures. Which are we, doves or vultures? Helen?
I think the image of a wax that the queen can mold her subjects into whatever form she wants them to be is something that would appeal particularly to the queen. It's what every autocrat wants, is completely moldable subjects.
Yeah. This whole wax thing is very interesting. I mean, the fact that it's presumably beeswax for the lights at court, because it's much better candlelight than what they were using for in other places, tallow, which was smelly and awful. So we have the idea in the opening, the prologue, about how we're lighting you, but we're also consuming ourselves and burning down. And then here we have the idea that, and now we have this wax, which you can, do what you like with. And we've also had bees, of course, elsewhere in the play, and the idea of honey and wax. I mean, it's a kind of recurring thing. I mean, it may just be because he likes talking about these things anyway, but I think there is a kind of progression here.
Yeah. We're about to go into final thoughts. Alan, very briefly.
Yeah, I was just thinking that it's rather nice to have the epilogue at the court, not the standard issue one that we've seen in one or two of the later pieces, where it's basically trying to cozy up to the queen, the councillors, and giving name checks to anybody they think they might be getting a favour of. There's not the same degree of grovel. Yeah,
it's basically it's up to your highness to decide whether we did well. And leave it at that. Yes, there's a little bit of a hint of grovel at the beginning, but more for the public performance than at Blackfriars than for the court stuff. The court seems much more confident. We've done the trial run, we've done the out of town tryouts. We know this show works. Hope you like it. Okay, we're going into extra time and final thoughts. For those who've been here for both sessions, overall, the play as a totality, thoughts about what we might be looking at doing with this in terms of performance, pros and cons. You know, we're allowed to be critical as long as we're not overly, you know, overtly negative. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't point out issues that might arise, especially with modern performances. I'll start with Aliki first. Aliki, final thoughts.
Okay, so I really enjoyed it, mostly as philosophy jokes strung along a romance plot. And of course, I find that an interesting thing to stage, but I think that it might be really difficult for us to gloss it for a modern audience in a way that they find it funny. But worth a try.
Francis, you've joined us mid-flow. How's it all for you?
I certainly enjoyed the second half more than the first. When I was reading the first half, I found the text quite difficult to parse, but reading the second part with you guys, yeah, I just enjoyed it much more, I think. I found it a very interesting, I found the sort of combination of the romantic plot, as it were, and the philosophical jokes and the philosophical discussions. I just found it a very interesting combination. I don't think I've seen that in any of the plays I've been involved with here so far. I found the ending a bit anticlimactic. You know, I'm used to lovers having a few more obstacles to overcome in these types of plays. But I would be very interested to see it performed, partly because of just the very smooth scene changes and the fact that Diogenes seems to be on stage all the time.
Oh, I think his tub is. I'm convinced he just pops up.
Like Bill and Ben.
Yes. There's so many short scenes. I mean, in terms of the structure of the play, it's so many very, very short scenes, just sort of pop in, pop out. I mean, the dramaturgy is very interesting, and it is an ideas play in the way that, you know, mirrors, sort of, I say earlier, Tudor interlude type things, but with a plot that's much more than just, I mentioned earlier, Play of Love by John Hayward. Full cast audio adaptation is available on the podcast, which is purely a disputation about love from 4 different angles. And and they sort of weave incident together, but there is no plot. Some people are in love, some people aren't. And so there's little moments like that in here where people do go off and go into the ideas, but there is still a narrative and a world around, and there is a defined world that we are living in. So I find that really, really interesting. And yeah, how do you tie all those threads together? Because it's not tidy dramaturgically. Eric, you've been here for both sessions. Final thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely, it feels like more intelligent comedy to a degree than like the other one we had where they kind of went, oh yes, and look who's coming, and then to introduce like the next scene, but which was hilarious at the time. But I mean that was a different type of comedy. But yeah, it was. I think this was. It's interesting. We mentioned, I think yesterday, that we don't see Alexander in his sort of military form. We see him in his sort of human lovey-dovey almost form, but not quite lovey-dovey. Just like sort of, you know, doing the admin basically, but after everything has been conquered and sort of stuff. And now he's off to fight another war, basically, which makes me wonder who broke his heart before Thebes, and sort of in order for him to go conquering.
That's the thing. Yeah, Alexander, he has enough time to be in love. He does not have time for a relationship.
Yeah.
So he's got enough downtime to go, oh, that's lovely, love. But actually, he never talks to anybody apart from his best mate. and vaguely to Diogenes, but even Diogenes, he doesn't talk to him for very long. So he doesn't actually have time for people.
Yeah.
So I find that quite interesting. Helen, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm not Lyly's greatest fan, but I did enjoy this play. And I think, in fact, it could be very, very funny. I think that Diogenes is seriously funny, especially if he's prepared to be a little mad. I mean, what you would do with the tub, I don't know, but my idea was that it should be constantly on and moderately stationary. But I think you've got to put a lot more peril into the Apelles Campaspe relationship to make it more interesting. I think they have got to be genuinely afeared. And I also think that the argument between whether a king should be a warrior or a philosopher or a statesman, and is it possible for him to be both, which is partly what's being discussed here. I think that needs to be brought out a bit more. But I think mainly it's a romantic comedy.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're talking about, you want there to be more sense of peril or fear, for what's happening. The thing is, I don't think the text actually delivers that, or is actually interested in delivering that. I don't think it's there. I think that's what we might want, but I don't think the play's actually doing that. Though maybe at pace it will seem different. I mean, I think it's very important to emphasize we've been stopping and starting constantly, and this play will flow in a very different ways when we come to a second look. But yeah, it's what the play is trying to do as opposed to what other plays with this, in theory, the same plot might be trying to do. It's an interesting question. Alan, final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it works quite well. I think the two sequences you got with Apelles and Campaspe, basically doing the verbal fencing, I think played at speed, that would work extremely well. I think if I were taking a blue pencil to any of it, I'd probably lose both of the epilogues. And I'm not convinced that 5.3, which is the sequence with the three kiddies being introduced and showing off in front of Diogenes, actually adds anything much to the Gaiety of Nations. But that may be, others would probably disagree with me. But that just feels like it was almost chucked in there to give an opportunity for some of the younger kids to do some sort of role rather than actually adding to the main line.
It is interesting that, our modern thought is always to simplify and to narrow down focus, and when extraneous characters like that appear, of going, right, well, can we just cut them out? And is that just simply a modern thing, or is that actually a meaningful critical issue with the player, or is it just we like things to be tidier, and is things being a little untidy fine? I ask the question without expecting necessarily any answers now. So I'll go to Lois. Final thoughts.
Right. Yes, I've been trying to keep quiet about this play because I know it quite well. I mean, I've taught it in the far distant past. And I think it's lovely. But I mean, speaking of unnecessary characters, I mean, you keep wondering about Timoclea, who appears in the opening scene, has a very impressive short exchange, when she says that Alexander can't conquer what is immortal, I think. And when she's told Thebes was not, she says virtue is. And then that's the end of her in the play. And, she really ought to come back or do something. In fact, you keep wondering, why isn't she marrying somebody else? I mean, all these men around, But I think it would work extremely well if one emphasized the kind of rapidity of the transitions from one scene to another. And I suppose if you were thinking of what to do with Diogenes, he seems to me to be almost like a talk show host, or the you know, he has his radio program, and people keep coming in as special guests and drawing him out, and he keeps being terribly rude to all of them, and they love it and go away again. I mean, you could somehow keep cutting between that and then the extreme rapidity with which Apelles and Campaspe go from mild flirtation to suggestion to declarations of love. You know, it's really very effective. I mean, you know, just short snippets, but you get the whole story.
Really glad you brought up Thermoclea, because, you know, I don't have a problem with her being in the first scene. My problem is the scene after, where Alexandra and Hesphaestion are having this talk. They mention her, and so I go, that's a character who's going to be hanging around. And that's the point where I sort of go, well, you know, she serves a very good function in that first scene, and then it's like we're being built for her to do something else, as to be a separate love plot, and it's like it just got dropped somewhere in committee. Yeah, it's interesting that, as opposed to other scenes where it's just, here is a scene of some philosophers being funny, it's like it feels like there's a plot line that never happened. That's a really interesting point. Lisa, you've only been here for this session, so final thoughts from you as best you can get from what you've discovered.
Maybe it's reading it aloud, but I also thought this half, just from reading it myself and then reading it, you know, hearing people read it, that could be what was part of it, but I like the second part better. And also, yeah, maybe you wouldn't be able to do this in lesson performance, but I also wanted higher stakes on the relationship outside of the king, because Campaspe has so many speeches about how dangerous the love of a king is, and then she's trying to have her own life on a separate, and then all of a sudden the king's like, it's fine. So it's just an interesting ending. You're waiting for some big denouement, and it kind of doesn't come. But also, I liked the modern questions that we're dealing with as far as relationships, how we view them now, and how things would have looked then. I'm always interested in examining that, as far as like why we still continue to read this work, and those questions are interesting to me about how we look at things as a modern audience versus how they would have. I've never been a fan of, it was a different time, something's wrong, it's wrong all the time. So how you handle that with a modern audience, and what do you end up having to even cut, you know, because that happens in early modern, just because it just is completely, you know, inappropriate. So this had some good moments for that. So yeah, overall I enjoyed it, but I think I like the second half, just because it's always more fun to read with people. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, in terms of explicit cuts, there's a few lines where you have a beauty standard of white and black, which needs to go, and other elements. But on the whole, it's an interesting of cutting this to change the focus and to change the production you want to make, because you could remove the philosophers.
That's true.
To a very large degree. And just focus in on these central four characters and create a very interesting show. I don't necessarily
do a quick 90-minute thing. Yeah.
And that could be something that actually appeals to people, because there is something meaty there that could be played with, and for that matter distorted from the original author's intent, and that's still cool as well. So as well as just leaving it, broadly speaking, as writ, and just giving it
and grappling with those problems. Yeah.
Yeah. Lynn.
Yes, I'm thinking about what Francis said about expecting more complications, and you know, Helen trying to pull a new comedy sort of plot out of this, and I kind of tend to think that that trying to make it a romantic comedy and maybe put more focus on the love triangle is maybe that's not the way what we want to do with this. I mean, structurally, the fact that Alexander's even in love with Campaspe, that first plot point gets introduced fairly late. We don't get introduced to the rivalry between Alexander and Apelles till halfway through the play, and then it's actually quite late when we find out that Campaspe reciprocates Apelles' affection. So that plot structure is shifted towards the end of the narrative, much more than is expected in a romantic comedy. So that signals to me that it's maybe a little bit, that the blood plots there really more as a token, and that it is a play of ideas, that we're thinking about the tension between love and war, what it means to be a successful leader or a successful man, what the problems of the conventions of wooing. Is philosophy useful in life at all? So I think the sort of intellectual side of it's what makes it interesting and different for me, and that's something that I would like to see if it works in production. I think for the right audience, maybe a student audience who are used to sort of living in their heads and thinking about questions of philosophy and epistemology and things like that are, you know, sort of used to these sort of intellectual pleasures. Maybe that would be the audience that would respond to the play of ideas and recognize that the love story it's fun and it's satisfying, but it's not the main point.
Yeah, as actors, we're used to sort of plotting a through line for our character's journey, but maybe actually what we need to do is sit down with this play is actually plot the through line of ideas, actually see how they flow through the narrative, and make that move. We are very over time, by the way. So Lois, very briefly.
Okay, well, I've got an idea for combining two things that have been interesting me. Why don't we do the play as with Queen Elizabeth in the audience? Queen Elizabeth becomes Timoclea. In the second scene, she realizes that they're dragging her into a love plot and insists that they get out of it. At the end of that part of the story, she goes back and watches the rest of the play.
Oh yeah, they're creating a sort of overframing context of its of performance. Yeah, I like that. Sarah, final thoughts?
Yes, thank you. I know we're running over time, but I have much to say. I unlike Francis and someone else, Lisa, I actually really enjoyed yesterday more, and that's probably because I was in the room for the reading. But also, I love plays of ideas. I was salivating yesterday. Today, I found my mind wandering a bit. And then I thought, why is that? Why is that happening? Because the focus is coming down. Theoretically, it's all coming together. What's going on here? And what I've come to the conclusion of, just as a first thought, is that the problem is that for me, the romance doesn't work. It starts off as a play of ideas with a romance. It then turns into a rom-com in the second half. And for a rom-com to work, you've got to really be rooting for both the hero and the heroine. And my problem is that Campaspe is a great character. I still don't think she gets quite enough, but she's a great character. But the painter dude is just like, he's not a great romantic comedy hero. And I'm thinking, actually, I would have preferred her to get together with Alexander, because he's the interesting guy in this play. He's the one with the charisma, the kind of the thought. He's the one who, he doesn't really go on a character journey, but he has the capacity to go on a character journey. And he is the guy who I find interesting in this play. And Apelles is just kind of, you'd have to, as you'd need a director who really knew their business, because they would have to bring something out of Apelles to make him charismatic, to make him the guy that we all want to root for. Because honestly, by the end, I'm thinking, Alexandra is Bogart in Casablanca. And it's like, yeah, she goes off with another guy, but you're not really bothered about that plot. You're bothered about him and his story. And so that, I think, is why I found the second half slightly, not disappointing exactly, but it didn't quite seem to live up to the first half of me. And I also do agree about these side characters like Timoclea and also Milectus, who I read yesterday, and he had that fantastically funny speech where he was like, oh my God, philosophers, and then you never hear of him again. You don't want to be cutting that kind of stuff out because it's just gold. So if anything, I think you want to embrace all the different threads and, yeah, as Lynn said, maybe play down the romance and play up all these fantastically other interesting characters, and then just use the romance as the kind of structure that everything hangs off.
Of all the tubs in all of that, no, I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to try.
Oh, also, thank you for saying that, because when Lois was saying about Diogenes being a radio show host, it suddenly flashed into my mind. Oh, that's the way I should have played him. It's based on a play, actually. There's a film based on a play called The Man Who Came to Dinner from the 1930s, and it stars Monty Woolley as this absolutely cantankerous radio show host who breaks his leg and ends up spending Christmas in the house of some sort of bourgeois suburban factory owner. And he's just appalling to everybody. And he's super witty, but super cantankerous. And he has that kind of gruff bull mastiff kind of quality to him. And I'm like, that's how you play him, sitting in the tub. And if you haven't seen the film, I really recommend it because it's hilarious. Anyway.
Yes, we'll always have the symposium. Alexandra, final thoughts?
Yes, in agreement with Sarah about the fact that it might be that you don't actually need to do a lot or any cutting. It might just be about how this is done in terms of directing and performance, to bring out these two very different and very intentionally different strands of the story, and just treating it as, you know, two moods or kind of aspects with their own changes. I do think there are many ways, and they are very different, but they're very interesting, in which we could lean on either the light, the positive, the constructive characterization, or the dark stuff that we were seeing before, that we're now at the end having to go, hang on a second, this does not compute. So one thing that put me in mind, something that Lisa said put me in mind of the song "It's Cold Outside," right? Which is, if you listen to the words, it's quite rapey. But if you don't listen to the words, or not to all of them, it actually sounds very romantic and very positive. So how that dialogue is, and that I think relates to how some of the scenes in the play around Campaspe work, but also taking away the sexual aspect, how other scenes as well can have multiple meanings, like the stuff the philosophers were talking about, or right at the end, the scene in which we only realize at the end of the scene how much humor there was in it beforehand. There's a lot of layering in the text that we could lean on in a positive way, or we could lean on in dodgier senses, and I think either of those or a mixture of those would be really, really interesting to play, so that you don't have an Alexandra or anybody else who is just a perfect, complete, wonderful, shining paragon of perfectness, but you have people who feel things and urges and make decisions that are not necessarily the best, and they change their minds, and they do the right thing for the wrong reason, or the other way around. So yeah, there's a lot of depth to this that I think would be fascinating to explore in a performance. Don't know who'd buy the tickets, but I'd love to be in that rehearsal room.
Yeah, I have to say this is very much feeling like the kind of thing that we'd all love to sit and workshop for ages, because you could start those scenes with Apelles and Campaspe, and start with nothing, do not act, do not toneless, and see what comes out of that, and then start trying to decide what you're going to do with that scene, and you could spend forever playing around with that. So I think as play, as material, as entertainment, as thought piece, as comedy, as all sorts of things, this play has thrown up so many options, and so many different potential productions. I always like to look at the potentiality of a play. Last week we had a great deal of fun with the Bugbears. There's a fairly narrow range of how you're going to stage the Bugbears. with this, you could go in so many different directions. The playwright is throwing us so many different options, and some of those different directions are sort of the difference between them is about that big, and some of them are that big, and that's fabulous. That's what we like to find in a play. All that remains is to thank everyone who managed not to accidentally call the play Campaspe, which is a very different play and would come out with a very different response. Only one person managed to do that once, I think. And thank all the readers for their wonderful work, and say farewell.
Bye.
Bye.